Overrated, underrated, or properly rated. It's just a jumblation, but it's mostly basketball. Let's do it. Maybe I'll skip the non-basketball ones because I wouldn't know.
So I can make a video where I determine
just don't ask him about Tom Brady. He hates Tom Brady.
Whether or not they are overrated, underrated, or properly rated. Before I begin, I want to state there's no real order to this. I just took what I thought were the most interesting suggestions. Let's begin.
Let me see if I agree.
Says, Paul Pierce. A lot of people have mixed feelings about him, but I think you're of the age in which you watched him.
Paul Pierce, with the current criticism, underrated.
For most of his career, so what do you think? Well, I think most people realize Pierce was very good and even great for a few.
No, most like kids now, like he's one of those players that you don't even think if he was good or not, they just hate on him.
Years, but not in the
like,
upper echelon with guys like LeBron.
But then you randomly get the Twitter argument every other day. Oh, is he better than Carmelo Anthony? Now you're trying to piss me off, but he might be.
Duncan, Durant, or Steph. Remember when he allegedly shit his pants in a finals game, though? That was pretty funny. My verdict, properly rated. Yeah. The Tank, 5'6".
I'm not mad at it, though.
Gary Payton, largely talked about as one of the greatest defensive guards of all time, but no one really talks about how his supersonic teams fell short in the 90s. To me, Payton benefited from playing before social media, so his playoff failures, as alluded to, are largely forgotten about. And he also gets propped up by MJ fans to be a little bit better than he actually was to make MJ's 1996 championship seem more impressive. My verdict?
Overrated, but I think that most people, though, I don't see him never like at like the top of like all-time point guard lists. Like usually you go with Oscar Robertson and guys like that, and Steve Nash and Jason Kidd, and a lot of people over him. So he's not like super overrated, but maybe slightly.
Fragilistic
by his logic.
Paul George. His career has had so many ups
picture.
And downs that I honestly don't know where to rate him.
Paul George, I think he's starting to get his respect recently, but he's like underrated.
Well, I believe George was slightly overrated at times in Indiana and Oklahoma City, but actually since coming to the Clippers, he's become such a target for jokes and criticism that I think people actually overlook.
Now, by the way, this video is from, I think it's in March or May of, I think maybe May of 2022, so this year.
But now, my verdict, he's underrated, but still a playoff underachiever. Andrew Ramsey asked, Randall Cunningham always felt like a bit of an underachiever, but still broke the mold with his.
Is he from the Jets?
In his own words, yes. Randall was pretty lazy early in his.
Wait, no, is that the Eagles? The Jets? I don't know. I can't tell. I don't see a logo. It looks like an Eagle's on his shoulder.
But I wouldn't say he's over the consistency. He single-handedly made baseball viable.
I don't know anything about baseball.
And Reese Jones
that man looks like a father.
Jaguars. MJD's first 6 seasons in the league. I
remember this dude. I used to play a lot of fantasy football.
Unfortunately, he played for mostly shitty. Certainly was hard for me to say for 4.
I don't know anything about Kurt Warner.
Games. Swan is an infant.
I don't know anything about this guy. John Stockton.
Because of his records. Well, to me, John Stockton gets overrated by MJ fans to make his 2 rings versus Utah seem more impressive. I also think, in general, Stockton is overrated. He wasn't nearly good enough as
I think everybody's given up on Stockton.
A scorer to warrant the praise he gets. He was a very good player who played forever to accumulate massive counting stats. Verdict?
He actually might be properly rated because of how many people call him overrated.
Overrated. Den says, Vince Carter, his legacy is so interesting to me and I feel like his career is so unique.
Crazy. It's funny is that he said crazy athletic, crazy aesthetics too. Oh man, he played 80 years. Oh man, he was so good at dunking. Oh man, he was a solid scorer. He might be properly rated, but certain like casual NBA fans might overrate him,
as he had great longevity while being crazy athletic. Well, like Stockton, Carter played forever to compile massive counting stats, but unlike Stockton, Carter isn't viewed as a top 25 to 30 player ever. I think for the most part, people realized he was very good for about a decade, then hung on for way too long. No offense, Darren Hernandez. Verdict, properly rated. Alex Von
That's
Holten,
crazy.
I'm curious of your opinion on Brian Urlacher. Bears legend, in my opinion, seems to get talked about less and less now.
Why is who below Dame?
Well, Urlacher is obviously a great player, and his spot in the Hall of Fame was well-deserved. He was excellent as a pass.
I don't know anything about bro.
Yarnball G says, Bernard King.
Bernard King. Underrated. Most underrated player in
ever
NBA.
Come back good after an Achilles tear and was still an amazing scorer in the 1980s. Underrated in my opinion. King was an amazing scorer, that much is true, and it's also true he wasn't good at anything else, and his teams usually sucked. If he played today, there's no doubt he'd be called a stat patter, but his best years came in a major market with the Knicks, and nostalgia is a bitch, so he's looked at favorably. Verdict?
Screw you. Screw you.
Overrated. Matthew Nolet says, Wayne Gretzky. He's regarded as the greatest hockey player ever, but with Ovechkin, Gretzky.
I don't know anything about bro, but I'm interested to see what he says.
That was more offensive friendly than McDavid, Crosby, and Ovechkin, but come on. There's no way Gretzky can be overrated. His production is so ridiculous, and he checks off every box in
Respect for knowing stuff about every sport. I don't got time for that.
To me, he's rightfully seen as the hockey GOAT. Verdict, properly rated. David writes, Wes Welker, dude.
He was on the Patriots, right?
Did so much, and I don't think he ever got for dropping a shitty throw by Tom Brady late in Super Bowl 46. He never won a Super Bowl, and his replacement Julian Edelman went on to put up great playoff numbers. But yes, Welker was an absolute monster for a good 6 years in New England. I do agree that he's largely forgotten. Verdict: underrated. Borba Fat says Gale Sayers could have been one not over.
I don't know what that is.
I'd like to hear your opinion on DK Metcalf, especially regarding his potential for a place in the Hall of Fame. Look, Metcalf's a good wide receiver who creates a lot of media attention.
I already know he's gonna say properly rated or overrated. Yeah, you could hear by the way he started it. Bo Jackson. I don't know.
Fewer rushing yards than Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh. Verdict: overrated. Wow. Ryan says Chris Webber.
Oh, he's probably underrated.
So much of his career is overshadowed by unfortunate moments and mistakes, when in reality he was a fantastic player who had a Hall of Fame worthy career and should have a ring. I mostly agree with this. Webber never lived down the infamous timeout at Michigan and has since become a much maligned broadcaster for TNT. But even though it's not completely unfair to say he had some struggles in the playoffs, he did have a legitimately great run with the Kings, and he should have won a ring in 2002. Verdict: underrated. Suggested Tiger says, hey,
imagine
Barry,
how much that do for his legacy if he won that ring.
But he definitely deserves to be on the list. These nuts. Now, why would you say that? That is not funny. There are kids watching this. Grow up. Seriously, come on. The poetry god, Chris Paul. A lot of good counting stats and accomplishments for the regular season, but not as much playoff success as one would think. I like CP3 and have rooted for him throughout his career, but at this point, yeah, there's really no denying that he just can't be trusted in the playoffs. I feel like he's considered an all-time great, but not the GOAT point guard, which is pretty accurate, though. Verdict: properly.
Chris Paul probably. Yeah, because Chris Paul is like really good. Like despite him selling, really good, like really good player. Also 6 feet tall.
He's Abdullah. I hope I'm saying that right. If I'm not, I swear to God, I'm not doing it to be racist.
People tend to believe that he's either a Hall of Fame or a super overrated system player. I'm curious to see what you think. Nah, I think people believe that he's like in between, but still a Hall of Fame because he's on the Warriors. Like he's not a super overrated player, and he's not like a normal Hall of Fame talent, but he's Draymond.
I swear. Draymond Green. People tend to believe that he's either a Hall of Famer or a super overrated.
And he is a Hall of Fame because of that.
Curious to see what you think. Well, Draymond will never be the first option, but he excels at everything else from passing to defense. Steph fans tend to downplay his skill set to make Steph look better until, of course, you mentioned the 2016 finals. Then Draymond missing one game is somehow the reason why Golden State lost 3 straight. Verdict: underrated. Legend Bugga. Derrick Rose. He had a great start to his career, but because of how funny...
Yeah, when you've been a constant in a team as successful as the Warriors, and on top of that, you've been a constant and you're just bad at offense, like bad at scoring, that's pretty impressive. Like you're starting on a team and you can't score.
Was to watch and how well liked he is. I feel that he's become pretty...
like Dennis Rodman type stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like it's Dennis Rodman type stuff minus the cool hair.
Overrated. You're right. D Rose was incredibly exciting to watch, but I don't think he deserved his MVP, and I think people really overstate how good he was before injuries because of nostalgia. He was an all-NBA caliber player, but not the top 25 to 30 player ever that some people act like he was.
Derrick Rose is when he plays basketball, he's such a smart, composed dude. I felt like he was very, it was different than some of the like newer, more athletic, like guys like of similar athleticism, like Ja. I mean, Ja is yet to be determined because he's so young. He's like really so young still, but like Ja and Russell Westbrook, because he had so much more control and like poise with the basketball. I felt like he wasn't like a crazy passer, crazy playmaker, nor was he a crazy shooter. And I feel like there's an argument that all these guys that nowadays are better than him. So I guess there's an argument, you know what I'm saying? I would say there's more D Rose. Like earlier, I had an argument for Vince Carter about, oh yeah, Vince Carter's overrated because people like are blinded by like him being cool and athletic and stuff. There's more D Rose stands than Vince Carter stands. So it's possible that it's very probable, honestly, that he's overrated. I love Derrick Rose, so I don't really care. But I would say it's like slightly though, because like there is a chance in the new era too and everything. Like if you go back and watch how he played, there's a chance that he would have been as good as some of these other guys. You know what I'm saying? If not better.
Verdict?
I think it's just so up in the air in such a what if scenario. He was also still 22, 23 years old.
Overrated. Dark Rayul says Troy Aikman, not a Hall of Fame quarterback, pedestrian.
And he had deep playoff runs as well. I think at least one. Plus he hit the big. But you know what else is? You know, it's kind of, he hit that huge shot off the glass with the cool little celebration afterwards in the Cavaliers series. Although they did lose that series, that was also another series where I think Bron hit a shot from the corner as a game winner.
That was carried by.
Is Paul George better than D Rose? I mean, career-wise, there's no argument for Paul George being on the top 70. I mean, for D Rose being on the top 75, and there's a huge argument for Paul George being on it. So there's your answer.
Every other player besides himself.
Way more longevity.
I completely agree with that. Aikman has been decried as overrated.
If Rose continued what he did for the next 10 years, of course,
and it is true that as far as Hall of Fame quarterbacks go,
it was crazy. I remember such a slim amount of memories from like that early the time I started watching the NBA, like 2011, aside from like the Knicks and a couple other games the Knicks played against. But I remember watching that game 1 of the playoffs when Derrick Rose got injured. I don't remember the exact moment, but I remember like vibing out and like, I don't know, just like chilling out and like having that first game on.
His stats are lacking, but his playoff run from 19
I can't say I'm hyped to see the Clippers play. Prime versus prime, that's debatable because that one Thunder year, Paul George was pretty crazy when he got injured, I think, and he was in the MVP race. Because like when you look at a lot of these guys' stats, even MVP runner-up stats against Derrick Rose's stats in his MVP season, a lot of them tend to be better. So it's like hard to judge like now versus then. But totally getting hyped to watch the Clippers. I can't get hyped to watch the Clippers until I see the Clippers play because they've had too many injuries.
1992 to 1995, where he won 3 rings, is legitimately otherworldly amazing and largely over. Michael Vick. People have mixed feelings because of his jail time. Wait, Michael Vick went jail? What? But you can't forget how he changed the game. But what do you think? Well, Michael Vick is the Allen Iverson of the NFL. He's the most exciting quarterback to ever play, but outside of a year or two, he really sucked as a passer. I think people were just so enamored with his physical skills that they overlooked his massive flaws and his fragility. My verdict? Overrated. Kevin Pilati says, Julian Edelman is a good one because he is regarded as a Hall of Famer, but his overall production is so overwhelming. Well, Edelman was drafted into the best situation possible for a tiny white slot wide receiver, but I'll be damned if he didn't take advantage of it. No, he's not a Hall of Famer like some say, but this motherfucker was always open on important downs in the playoffs. I can't say that's
properly
overrated.
Rated.
Verdict? Properly rated. Sawyer is cool. Justin Herbert. A lot of people think he is automatically
Chargers,
average.
right?
Look, you're wrong. Herbert do believe his career, but then again, he is on the Chargers, so you never know. Verdict? Properly rated. MILF Hunter says, well, what's
Karl Malone.
I don't know. Karl Malone. Even though he is always going to be an evil guy, he did ball on the court. Well, we all know Malone's a piece of shit, and in my opinion, he's the biggest playoff choker in history. I will say, though, his regular season career might actually be underrated, unfortunately. But I largely think he's properly rated until MJ fans act like he's as good as Kevin Durant or Steph. Verdict? Properly rated.
That was that like whole breakdown threw me for a loop at every step. I respected.
Scott Pantera says, Allen Iverson. People hold him in...
Allen Iverson. When you think of Allen Iverson, I got the pop figure right back there of Allen Iverson. Oh, beautiful. Like that's a guy. That's a player right there, right? But shot under 40% for a lot of his prime years. People whose only real, I view him as a massively overrated chucker, similar whose only real claim to fame was his handles and sound bites. Yeah, but then how did he make it to the finals? I know it might have been a week, you know what I'm saying, week East or whatever, but how the hell did he make it to the finals? If it was just, you know what I'm saying? I don't think he's overrated because most people, we have these top 10, top 15, top 20 arguments all the time. He's never there. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
In similar regard to guys like
I think he did I think he's probably rated person. I think he's probably rated. Most people agree that the thing switched. Now Dwayne Wade, most people agree that D Wade's over him, but I don't think he's much lower than that. He's also probably lower than Harden. Oh yeah. You know,
Kobe, Steph, and
he's
Akeem,
100%.
But I view him as a massively overrated chucker, similar whose only real claim to fame was his handles and his sound bites. I largely agree with that. Much like with Michael Vick, Iverson's culture impact is not overrated, but his play on the court was.
Didn't AI have DPOI? 6 man was like Eric Snow or some 6 man a year, but Kembe was DPOI, but he was an old man.
Terribly inefficient, and outside of 2001, his team
like,
never came
I don't know
close to
how
winning
to
the title. Absolutely fun to watch, though, no doubt about it. Verdict: overrated. Cinemamba says Scottie
I'm not surprised
Pippen
he said
gets
that,
underrated by people trying to prop MJ
Scottie Pippen might be overrated.
up and overrated by people trying to downplay MJ.
He
Not
might be
really
he's probably
opposed to
rated
some
just by what this
cohesive
guy
being his own
said.
Player. Well, like the question alluded to, Pippen really depends on who you talk to. He was a legitimately great player and an excellent second option who showed when MJ was off playing baseball that he could be a great first option as well. However, it is also fair to say that he wouldn't be as well known or has won any rings without Michael Jordan. In the end, I think the praise and the criticism balances out. Verdict: properly rated.
Yeah,
Christopher Mercer says, Donovan McNabb. Love to hear talk about a former Eagle. Well, McNabb was my favorite player growing up and the reason why I'm an Eagles fan. As time has gone on, I think his career has been largely
Scottie
forgotten.
Pippen, though.
He was
Cool dude.
really Benson porn star. Kevin Famer. Verdict:
Hey,
properly rated. Chase Johnson. That name literally translates. He carried a horrible franchise on his back for most of his prime before.
Oh yeah, KG is properly rated, but like underrated. Like KG could probably be like strong top 10, top 5. I don't want to make it more complicated than it has to be. Without the injuries in Boston, without how garbage the Wolves were, you know what I'm saying? Like if he was in that Tim Duncan role, all I'm saying,
winning a ring just as he started.
I don't even know if he would be as good, but all I'm saying is that he would be good enough to where he'd probably be top 10.
To decline. He's a legitimate all-time great. However, he is fortunate he didn't come up in the social media era, or else he would have been destroyed for his his lack of playoff success with Minnesota. Verdict, properly.
I guess, you know, when you look at Minnesota, they do look like a very weak team, but I guess most of the teams are pretty weak. But I disagree. I don't think he's I think he's properly rated, but I don't think he's
Rated. Rock.
I don't think there's any reason for him to be overrated. And even after what he said, I don't know.
Wilkin. Kawhi Leonard. People have made the
Sam
argument
Cassell
that he has 2
and
finals
Latrell
MVPs
Sprewell
because
and
of good
Wally.
situations rather than elite play. Well, for years, I
Kawhi is underrated.
was on the Kawhi is overrated bandwagon, and I still think he gets overrated when people try to prop him up just to discredit LeBron. But I can't deny he is an absolutely ridiculous playoff performer when healthy, which is becoming rarer and rarer.
Kawhi is underrated, and I don't use that the problem against LeBron. I use it the problem against KD. I think he's better than KD.
Thank you for blowing that 3-1 lead versus Denver. Verdict, properly
I would rather have Kawhi in the playoffs than Kevin Durant.
rated. Your boy 73 says, I feel like Jerome Bettis would be an interesting one. I was never a fan of Bettis. He didn't run for much yards per carry. He provided nothing as a receiver.
The big
and he
dude.
padded his touchdown totals with runs on the goal line. In my opinion, he does not belong in the Hall of Fame. Verdict, overrated. Daily dose of baseball.
You put properly rated.
Derek Jeter. People say he's the best shortstop of all
I want to
time.
hear
If he
this. I'd never watch baseball.
closer, he's probably the 7th or 8th best. He is criminally overrated, but I'd love to see and hear what your take is on Jeter. Jeter fluctuates between being overrated and underrated. If he didn't play in New York, he wouldn't have had the career he had or be as famous as he is. But on the other hand, he was a legitimately great player and a deserving Hall of Famer. I think, similar to Scottie Pippen, the hate and the love evens out. Verdict, properly rated. The Steel Curtain, Tracy McGrady. T-Mac is a
T-Mac,
childhood hero to many fans.
he's so good, but had such minimal success. I don't know. Like, it's an easy cop-out to say, oh, he didn't make it past the first round. He's low. He's overrated. And then at the same time, a solid reason. And then, like, there's just so many what-ifs with his career when it comes to injuries, bad teams, that, like, it's just weird. It's weird. Honestly, though, I was about to say, most people do see him for what he is, but then he's another one of those guys that like has his real support, like crazy supporters. But I think he's probably rated.
So he gets viewed favorably.
Also, he's an underrated passer.
Even though if he played in the social media era, he would have gotten hell for never winning a playoff series. He was an incredible talent and a great player until injuries hit.
Yeah, he
would
have got hell though.
Verdict, properly rated. My name says Cristiano.
He was just so good otherwise that it evens out.
Ronaldo. As everybody knows, I'm one of the most respected soccer experts of all time, and I can confidently say Cristiano Ronaldo is sexy and definitely doesn't pad his stats on penalty kick. Verdict, properly rated and sexy.
I don't know any of this, but based and I know speed. Wait,
Busto 12.99.
Speed likes-
Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning
Right.
is not overrated. That's really all I gotta say. Verdict, properly
out the Peyton Manning.
rated. Mojo Reds. Devin Hester. Look, you might want to wear earmuffs for what I'm about to say. Devin Hester is overrated as fuck. Yes, he's the best punt returner of all time.
I was about to say, I remember dude as a punt returner.
Does that mean he belongs in the Hall of Fame? Absolutely not. He has fewer career touchdowns than Ted Ginn Jr. Special teams touchdowns are not worth more points than other touchdowns. Verdict, overrated. Lee Keebum. Hey, that is not funny. That is not funny. That is offensive. And honestly, I'm calling him to be over police. But I do believe, like most older NBA legends, he benefits from a lack of scrutiny that modern day players face. He's widely considered a top 3 player ever, and I think that's appropriate. Verdict, properly rated. The Sports Stop W, Tim Duncan. Well, much
I think he's properly rated.
like Kareem, Duncan's resume is so incredible, it's hard to say he's overrated, but I have constantly heard how underrated he is for years now, and it's honestly gotten annoying. The first half of his
Yeah, that is true.
career is probably underrated, but the latter half of his career is overrated. In the end, it balances out. Verdict, properly rated. 7 Sinful Saints, Joe Burrow. Burrow is one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. However, I do feel he was getting overrated a little bit this postseason as the Bengals had their run to the Super Bowl. And in the Super Bowl, I felt he wasted some chances to close the deal. I don't think he's better than Mahomes, Allen, or Herbert like some people do. Verdict, overrated slightly. Cock Sneed Fartin. That is great for the sport. If there is, Fred, I'd like to know your opinion. And
he got the Doom profile pic. Living off borrowed time, the clock ticks faster. That'll be the hour they knock the slick blaster.
On him, I think he's overrated. Look, I'm not going to sit on Babe Ruth. That would be gross. But I will say Ruth is in the same category as Wilt Chamberlain and Jim Brown. His competition was weaker than later eras, that's true, but his production is so ridiculous.
It looks like he makes a mean sub.
It's impossible for him to be overrated, in my opinion. However, it is fair to wonder if he'd be as dominant in later eras. I think he would have been great regardless.
Does Devin Booker deserve cover athlete? Honestly, no. They should have gave cover athlete to someone like Embiid or, well, Jokic. Jokic hasn't been on it yet, right? They should have gave it to Jokic. Jokic just won 2 MVPs. 2.
Verdict properly rated. Rams 2022 champ, OBJ. I was a huge fan of Odell when he first broke into the league, and he was legitimately incredible his first 3 seasons. However, since 2017, he's dealt with injuries, and even when he's been on the field, he hasn't come close to living up to his superstar status.
But I'm happy
he's a great number 2 receiver, though. Verdict, overrated. Coffee black, Steph Curry. Steph Curry is not overrated until the moment his delusional ass fan base inevitably tries to put him in LeBron's class. I think he's a top 7 to 8 player ever and capable of blowing games open better than anybody I've ever seen. But his resume requires more context than any other all-time great. Plus, he's a massive front runner. Verdict, properly rated. HBG 313. LeBron. LeBron is a top 2 basketball player ever and easily the most hated player ever. He's not overrated. In fact,
he's the most hated player ever? Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I would.
He's just the hated, most hated, but he might be the most, like, I mean, no, I think Jordan's the most loved, but he might be the second most loved.
Say at times it's the opposite. Verdict, underrated. Kyler Schmutzler. Tom Brady. Barry, you already know. Well, several months ago, I finally relented and called Brady the GOAT, and unfortunately, I still think that. I also still believe he's been otherworldly lucky in high leverage moments more than any other all-time great quarterback to win as many rings as he has. Is it possible for a player to be both overrated and the GOAT? I say yes. Verdict, overrated, but still the GOAT, unfortunately. And finally, Michael Jordan. Surprisingly, nobody brought up MJ, but I couldn't leave him out. He's a top 2 player ever and was the clear-cut GOAT before LeBron showed up. I still go back and forth between him and LBJ as the GOAT, but at the same time, his fans act like he was flawless and never lost. Is he overrated? Not unless you think he's leaps and bounds above LeBron. Verdict, properly rated.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go to this video. That was pretty cool, though. I actually am happy I watched that. That was a pretty good video.